fire in the Amazon rainforest, and yet another area is being cleared. For the farmers, burning produces ash, which provides nutrients for their crops. For the ranchers and loggers, it's a quick way of getting rid of the unwanted rubbish of trees. In a rainforest of 8 million hectares, a single clearing like this is not particularly important. But fires like this can be seen all over the Amazon basin. Under each plume of smoke, an area of forest is disappearing, in some cases forever. Viewed from space, the picture is more alarming. There are fires everywhere. On one day in 1993, 36,000 separate fires were counted in the Amazon basin. It's caused much concern. Environmental pressure groups have mounted campaigns against deforestation. Yet the Brazilian government is not worried. Their official statement says,
"The image of the Amazon rainforest being cut down, burned and neglected by the Brazilian government is a long way from reality."
They point to the record of the rest of the world. 2/3 of the original forest in North America has already been felled. Europe has cut down 3/4 of its ancient forest. By comparison, the Amazon rainforest is still relatively intact.
Most of the Amazon rainforest is still there, which is a very important fact. But it also doesn't mean that there's nothing to worry about, although sometimes it's presented that way. As of 1991, which is the last year for which we have Landsat satellite data, 10.5% of what was originally forest was no longer there. So almost 90% was still there. But most of what had disappeared in just the last couple of decades. So the processes are very fast, and of course the causes of that deforestation are still in place.
But isn't this just a Brazilian problem? Why should we be concerned in Europe, or anywhere else for that matter? The answer is that the changes taking place in Brazil could affect the rest of the world, through the climate, and in particular through the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Plants, like all life on Earth, are based on the element carbon. Burn vegetation in the presence of oxygen, and one of the products is the gas carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is one of the main greenhouse gases. Here's what happens. Energy from the sun reaches the Earth. Some is reflected back into space. The rest warms the Earth and its atmosphere. At the same time, the Earth gives off energy, mainly as infrared radiation. Some of this passes into space, but some is trapped in the atmosphere, mainly by carbon dioxide. Increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, more energy is trapped, and the Earth becomes warmer. This is the greenhouse effect. And there's another problem. The forest itself is like a vast chemical factory, powered by energy from the sun, driving the process of photosynthesis. Water and nutrients are taken up by the roots of the trees and carried up to the canopy. In the leaves, complex reactions take place. As part of these reactions, carbon dioxide is taken from the atmosphere and oxygen is given out. So trees actually help to maintain the balance of gases in the atmosphere. And the rainforest is the main storehouse of carbon on Earth. Cut down the trees and the carbon will be released, much of it in the form of carbon dioxide. The greenhouse effect is leading to global warming, a gradual increase in temperatures on Earth. That is why the world's industrial countries are worried. Rising global temperatures could lead to melting ice sheets, rising sea levels, and worldwide flooding. But Brazil is a big country with a population of 160 million and growing at a rate of 6% a year. Amazonia can provide land for these people and food and raw materials for industries. The products of the forest, particularly timber and minerals, can be sold to earn hard currencies, which can be used to pay off Brazil's overseas debts. Brazil borrowed heavily to fund development projects like the Balbina Dam near Manaus. It has the largest overseas debt of any country in the world, and the interest payments are now more than $5 billion a year. That's $15 million a day. It sounds bad, but Brazil has one of the largest economies in the world, and it's growing rapidly. Brazil can meet its debts if it develops its resources. So why should Brazil take any notice of countries in the world who have exploited their own resources to the full, including clearing their own forests? After all, the burning of the rainforest puts into the atmosphere less carbon dioxide than is found in car emissions, and nobody's suggesting banning cars. There are in fact good reasons for the Brazilian government to rethink the exploitation of the forest and ask themselves two questions. How will Brazil be affected by environmental change? And is Brazil gaining the best return from the exploitation of the forest? In fact, Brazil may face its own environmental problems long before global warming takes effect. Carbon dioxide is not the only thing held in the rainforest. It's one of the wettest places on Earth. Almost every day it rains, and much of that water is held within the forest. Sometimes you can see it in the form of vapor. It is held as though in a giant sponge. Humidity in the forest is very high. Most of the water goes back up into the atmosphere. Less than a quarter escapes into the soil and rivers. Remove the trees, though, and all this water will have to go somewhere. So what will happen? The Amazon basin will become drier, and without forest, the land surface will become hotter. This will trigger storms that are more intense than at present. With no canopy to intercept the rain, this will happen. Soil erosion. The rainfall will wash away the soils, and they will end up in the rivers. This could eventually change the Amazon itself. It's perhaps difficult to imagine silt clogging up this mighty river. At this point, it's so wide that you can't see the opposite shore. Yet this huge expanse of water is only one of the tributaries of the Amazon, and it is nearly 2,000 kilometers away from the Atlantic Ocean. It's easier to understand here on the northern rim of the Amazon basin. These are the mountains of Roraima. Here the rivers are near their source. They are cutting back into the mountains, and they are carrying large amounts of silt. Increase the amount of silt going into these, or any river, and the river may change. It has already happened near these mine workings. Runoff from the cleared land and from the mine workings has washed soil into the neighbouring river, changing it completely. It is happening in parts of the Amazon already. If soil erosion increases, it could affect the main river itself. The result could be prolonged and widespread flooding. It's a big dilemma for Brazil. The rainforest has to be developed to provide wealth for Brazil and livelihoods for its people. But development appears to be destroying the forest. So what can be done? Is the answer simply to stop development and preserve the forest?
I think the first thing is that you have to take a positive approach to Amazonian development. You have to recognize the fact that the American West was developed in the 19th century. It was an unstoppable process. Amazonian development is an unstoppable process. The question is, what future for the Amazon? And I think the main question is, the main response I would give is that what do we want? We want perhaps not to maintain and preserve the existing ecosystems, but that whatever landscape emerges in the future is one that is productive, and the people, the Brazilian people that live in that landscape, have a reasonable quality of life, and that the productive potential of those landscapes and the resources that are contained in them are available in the long term. And so that, to me, is sustainable development, not just the preservation of forest.
Some say present development is not sustainable. It will leave virtually nothing for the children of the people who live in Amazonia. The question is, how can it be made sustainable? That's the difficult question. Well, some ways are being tried. These are researchers from the Amazon Institute for People and the Environment, and they are looking at new approaches to logging. On this trial plot, they are mapping and measuring all the trees and identifying those which are of commercial value. Then they decide how the trees should be felled and plot routes along which they can be dragged out of the forest. The aim is to reduce damage caused by selective logging.
We're not saying that managing the forest in this way will stop the forest being damaged, but it will minimize the impact and help the forest to regenerate. The way things have always been done, the forest would disappear in 90 to 100 years' time, but it can have a much longer life if managed properly.
Good in the long term, but even simple management techniques take time and cost money. And anyway, much of the logging in the Amazon forest is carried out illegally. The people who break the law won't follow rules for forest management. At present, logging is not a major cause of forest clearance, but that could be about to change.
There won't be commercial volumes of timber coming from Southeast Asia within a few years. And where else are big international companies from Japan and so forth going to look except the Amazon? There are already Asian companies showing up here and major inroads in Guyana and Suriname and other nearby places from Asian timber companies. And you can expect then large multinational pressure on timber here, which hasn't happened yet.
There are many questions asked about whether land in Amazonia is being used effectively. We've already seen that most of the rainforest clearance has been for farming, 2/3 for cattle ranching, 1/3 for small farming. But cattle ranching is inefficient. On this ranch, 20,000 hectares of land feeds fewer than 1 cow per hectare. It is not surprising that Amazonia can't even produce enough beef to feed its own people. Small farmers attracted to Amazonia in the 1970s by offers of free land also have to struggle with poor soil and low yields. They need help from the government to guarantee a price for their product and with the supply of fertilizers so that they can practice effective crop rotation. But there could be another way. Remember Manuel, the rubber tapper? He works 60 hectares of forest and makes a modest living without felling a single tree. He depends upon the richness of the natural rainforest and upon the variety of life within it. As well as the rubber trees which he taps, he also harvests natural oils and resins from his trees, and he collects crops like these Brazil nuts. His work is seasonal, so his earnings vary, but the productivity of his 60 hectares of forest is almost twice that of a caboclo farm after its first 2 years, and 6 times that of a similar area of the Dallas cattle ranch. Crucially, his activities do not damage the forest. He runs his land as an extractive reserve, and the government is now encouraging land use like this. This is another industry which depends upon the richness and diversity of the forest. Tourists are of growing importance to Brazil's economy, and they come to the Amazon to share the rainforest experience. These ants have a fearsome bite.
It gives you fever, headaches, and heart palpitations. If about 3 of them or 4 of them bite you, you have a weak heart. Every possibility you have a permanent conversation with St. Peter the Pearly Gate.
The Amazon rainforest is one of the wonders of the natural world. It holds an incredible variety of life. But that diversity is harmed when the rainforest is cleared. One estimate puts the number of species lost every year through the rainforest clearance at 27,000. But with so much of the rainforest left, remember, 90% of it is untouched. Does it matter? It might if this ever happens to you, if you have to undergo major surgery. If you do, you'll probably have to receive an injection of D-turbocurarin to relax your muscles. What has this got to do with the rainforest? Well, the drug was isolated from curare, which is an extract from a rainforest liana and is used by the Indians as a deadly poison. Here's another example, the steroid cortisone that you might need for sports injuries. That originally came from the rainforest. There's a long list of rainforest plants and animals that have formed the basis of beneficial products. What other medicines could be discovered there? We may never find out if clearance continues at present rates. The Indians of the Amazon rainforest have taught us a great deal in the past about the secrets of the forest, particularly with drugs and remedies that they use in their own forms of medicine. Perhaps there are still a lot of things that we can learn from them, but the Indians are under threat too. When the Portuguese explorers arrived in the 16th century, there were more than 5 million indigenous people in the region. That number is now down to around 200,000. 80 distinct indigenous cultures have disappeared since the beginning of this century. They're driven off their lands by developers and speculators. There have been many killings. The ones left are fighting for survival, including the Chikuna.
There have been many changes for the Chikuna because of contact with white people. Some have been good. We now have schools so that we can learn to read, so our people can improve and be equal to others. But there are bad things too. We're losing our own language and our customs. White man's church came and killed our real religion. This part of change makes my heart heavy for my people. I would like the people of the world to help us, to persuade the government of Brazil to let us keep our lands, to let us live in the forest as we always have.